10 years ago, I had this list in my head. I never dreamt that I'd get to the end of that list. So I've decided.
When River Monsters stopped airing on TV, fans were shocked, and no one got a clear answer. Millions of people around the world watched the show, which was about dangerous encounters in murky seas with strange creatures. But after 9 very stressful seasons, it was over. What took place behind the scenes? Why would a popular wildlife show led by one of the most respected people in wildlife TV suddenly go away? Today, we're going to talk about the River Monsters story that hasn't been told in years. This story might change the way you remember the show forever. He caught all the bad guys. River Monsters didn't end because it was getting boring. It didn't end because of drama or fights at the network. No, the reason was much less common and strangely fulfilling. Monster hunting became a worldwide obsession because of Jeremy Wade. He got everything there was to catch. Most shows try to fit too many things into one season just to stay alive. River Monsters did something that not many shows do. It stopped at the top, not because it had to, but because its job was done. The man who ran everything didn't just host a show. Most people would have given up on a task they had been working on their whole lives before the first season even aired. River Monsters was different from the start. It wasn't just a fishing show. The book was a mix of an adventure series, a detective story, and an animal thriller. But there was a bigger plan behind every huge pull on the fishing line. Jeremy Wade was thinking of a list of legendary and often made-up freshwater creatures that had been a part of local legends for decades, scared river towns, and fascinated scientists. These were creatures that lived in the dark. There were Goliath tigerfish with its rows of sharp teeth, giant catfish that were blamed for drowning locals, and arapaimas that were big enough to eat small cars. Following these creatures one by one started out as a positive idea, but it quickly turned into something much more intense. Wade crossed off another name on his list each season. Different ones took years, months, or even decades. One of his white whales was the Goliath tigerfish. He looked for it for more than 20 years. And when he did in season 2, it wasn't just a catch. It was an event that made him who he was. People watched as the seasons went on and Wade went through the Congo, the Amazon, the slopes of the Himalayas, and the swamps of Southeast Asia, and Wade's goals grew as the show's success did. He wasn't happy with simple leads or stories from other people. Every fish had to have a deep ecological meaning, a puzzle, or a fear. There were a lot at stake, and the stories were true. But there was a quiet truth behind all the action on screen. Less people were on the list. With each new season, there were fewer and fewer monsters that fit the show's original idea. And when the last season ran in 2017, everyone saw the truth, not just Wade. For the network too. The show River Monsters wasn't really canceled by Animal Planet. In fact, they were happy about it. Executives praised Jeremy Wade's unique ability to keep people's attention and turn scientific questions into exciting stories that keep you on the edge of your seat. But they also agreed on one simple point. The whole point of River Monsters was to find legends, but the legends were gone. In a press statement, Wade made it very clear. 10 years ago, I made a list of things I wanted to do that seemed too big to be possible. Now, I've crossed everything off the list, and then some. The reason for the show's end was one of the strangest ever. A lot of the shows begged the networks to give them one more season. Wade stopped running because he had nothing more to show. He had stood up to the most feared freshwater animals, brought them out into the open, and told their stories in an honest and moving way. For fans, it was both good and bad. They knew what was going on and wanted more, had done something very unusual. He didn't get thrown out. He won. Fans thought that was Wade's last cast. But then they found out what he went through behind the scenes. What's really going on behind the scenes? What River Monsters didn't always show was how much Jeremy Wade gave up to make each episode happen. People saw the finished film, which included clear shots of murky rivers, the catch, and narration that mixed folklore and science. But that finished version often hit a process that was hard, dangerous, and never ending. Wade wasn't just fighting fish that were hard to catch, though. He was fighting against some of the worst situations on Earth, and the wounds he got weren't always physical. A lot of people were afraid to go to the places where Jeremy Wade shot. These weren't normal wildlife hotspots or tourist spots. They were jungles that were hard to get to, riverbanks that weren't marked, and politically unstable areas where strangers were rare and things were harsh. Wade would often take days to get to these places. They would carry camera gear, fishing gear, and emergency supplies through thick vegetation and suffocating humidity, sometimes on foot and sometimes in flimsy dugout boats. There were no trucks, comforts, or quick routes. The show did a good job of building tension, but it didn't always show how dangerous things really were. Wade got malaria more than once while they were shooting. In one interview, he said that he had passed out from being in the hot sun for hours on end. People got bug bites that swelled up to the size of tennis balls, got tropical infections that could have killed them, and slept in mosquito net tents at night while animals howled and it was too hot to breathe. The places were both beautiful and harsh. Maybe the scariest parts were the ones where there was no help. Wade and his team often did their jobs without getting medical help right away. If you make one mistake, you might slip on wet rocks. The person could have died from a bite from the wrong bug, or a fight with a territory crocodile. Wade later said that there were times when he really thought about whether the show was worth it. He kept going though. The world had either misread, ignored, or forgotten about him because he was so obsessed with keeping records of species. It wasn't just bad for their bodies either. It became more and more difficult to deal with over time. Wade was more worn out than he let on during the show's run after being alone for weeks and having to deal with new cultures, languages, dangers, and demands all the time. He had to be a host, a biologist, an explorer, and the leader of a small group of people, all while making sure the finished footage met the high standards of the show. That kind of stress, especially when combined with being tired, left its mark. Wade didn't talk about any of this very often though. He kept the camera on the fish, the people, and the stories while the film was going. He didn't want to draw attention to himself. Part of what made River Monsters so strong was how humble they were. Wade slowly started to open up after the show was over though. In interviews and public events, he talked about how hard those years had been and how the constant travel, exposure, and lack of rest had hurt his health. For watchers, it was the first look at how much he had been through in secret for almost 10 years. Now that we look back, we can see that Wade's River Monsters was more than just a TV show. He was fully committed to her for years, and she pushed him to his limits. From the outside, the trip looked exciting, and it was. But behind every great catch was a man who had just made it through another week in a world that was often dangerous and uncertain. Still, that wasn't what ended River Monsters in the end. Wade was beat up, but not broken. He was still determined to keep going. What he learned next, though, would change everything. It had nothing to do with numbers, survival, or the hard work of making the show. There was one quiet fact that they couldn't get around. But danger wasn't the real reason the show had to end. The next big surprise, that was even stranger. The list of monsters was real and full. The outside of River Monsters looked like it would never end. There are so many rivers, fish, and local tales that it seems like there will never be enough stories. Jeremy Wade, on the other hand, says that the show was never meant to go on forever. It was sent on a very clear mission, and that mission had a finish line. Wade made a mental list of the world's most mysterious, scary, and legendary freshwater animals a long time before the first show aired. These were not only rare species, but also fish that were linked to myths and were often misunderstood or feared by people in the area. Some were blamed for deaths. Others were hidden from science. They were more than just catches. They were tales. The story had to be more than just a fish in the water for River Monsters to make an episode. There had to be a secret, a myth, and a way to hide. The show was built around that list. And over the course of 9 seasons, Wade went after and found every single animal on it, from the Arapaima in the Amazon to the Goliath tigerfish in the Congo. catfish the size of grown men and snakehead fish that scared whole towns. With each season, viewers got one step closer to the end of the trip, and in the end, it was done. Fully, quietly, and with nothing left open. Wade didn't want to make things take too long. He was aware of what happens when shows stay too long. People stop being interested. The stories aren't as good. And in the case of River Monsters, the show's main attraction, the mystery, would fade. It was clear, if the creature didn't really scare people or have an interesting story, it wasn't worth a show. He wouldn't make new seasons with filler episodes or old fish just to keep the cameras running. He instead chose to do something that almost no one on TV ever does. He decided to end the show while it was still well-liked. He insisted on finishing it in an honest way. Wade and the rest of the Animal Planet team didn't water down the brand. Instead, they made the last season a celebration of all they had done. They didn't just tie up any loose ends. They ended with some of their biggest stories yet. There was more to River Monsters last season than just a bunch of shows. A well-planned send-off. Wade went back to some of the most memorable places from earlier seasons to give them more meaning and closure. He also went after long-rumored aquatic threats, such as a mysterious sea monster in uncharted areas and a group of creatures from coral reefs that were said to have attacked and killed people in Indonesia. These were new ideas, not old ones. They were the last pieces of the puzzle that were left. But Wade's goodbye wasn't really about the animals anymore, as the last fish was pulled out of the water. It had to do with something more important, almost holy. It was true that River Monsters was no longer just a show. A rare mix of excitement, education, and pure awe. It was a sign. Wade also knew that the symbol would fade if the task went on without it. He kept it safe by ending it. Wade cared more about the honesty of River Monsters than about exposure. And the fact that they chose to finish instead of giving up is part of what made the show a modern legend. The monsters were caught, the stories were studied, and the mystery was given a chance to rest instead of being drained dry. But that wasn't the end of the surprise. Jeremy Wade did something that not many people thought he would do when the show ended. There was no pitch for a reboot. He didn't give up control. He didn't even take the deals that came his way. Wade's last goodbye wasn't just about fish, though. It had to do with keeping something even more wholly safe. Why did Wade turn down a spin-off or reboot? These days, not many things can end on a happy note in the entertainment world. When a popular show ends, everyone in the business works hard to bring it back. The market is full of spin-offs, copies, reboots, and new ideas. When it came to River Monsters, the urge was the same. The show was one of Animal Planet's most popular ever, after all. It had fans all over the world, a well-known host, and a formula that was easy to copy. That's what they thought. But Jeremy Wade didn't want to add to a story that was already complete. He said no to the deals that came his way. There were talks, though. Executives at the network knew that River Monsters still had value in the market. They talked about ideas. A new version with different hosts might be good. Maybe a sequel about animals that live in the ocean. Or a show like Legacy, where Wade teaches someone to take his place. He didn't feel right about any of it, though. He heard, but said no. Wade always saw River Monsters as more than just a show about big fish. It had to do with secrets, stress, and the truth. And to try to restart that magic just to keep it going would have been to betray what it was all about. Wade didn't say no out of pride. It was a matter of conviction. He was afraid of what he called selling out the idea. He worked hard to keep the tone serious, the science correct, and the point clear in the first series. River Monsters was made with a mix of instruction, conservation, and real adventure in mind. Every story was based on a real danger, a local myth, or a love of nature. He thought that making that into a flashy reality TV show was over. The top dramatized fights or stunts would make everything they'd worked on seem cheap. Being able to tell when to stop is a skill. Wade used that strength while being fully aware of it. He didn't try to get bigger deals or fame. Instead, he took a back seat and let River Monsters speak for itself. That's what he wanted the last season to be. The last season. No cliffhangers, no handoffs, just the end. Moving in this way makes me think of another famous TV goodbye. As a clear sign that this story was over, Michael Landon blew up the whole town of Walnut Grove at the end of Little House on the Prairie. Even though Jeremy Wade didn't need explosives, his choice to leave was just as brave. He didn't want someone else to take over River Monsters and change it, so that it was no longer known. The show was really about you. It felt like letting a stranger rewrite his life's work when he let the show go on without him. Each episode had his voice, his beliefs, and his vision. Some fans were sad that River Monsters wouldn't come back in a different form, but a lot of people admired Wade for it. In a time when most media items are reused over and over, his choice stood out. It was a quiet refusal to give in, a way to keep the show's character, since it had always been about going deeper. Not going on any longer. Wade didn't just defend a TV show, he defended a tradition. One that was based on bravery, interest, and hard work. That reputation wasn't something he was ready to give up for more airtime or money. He had spent almost 10 years telling stories that no one else could tell and introducing creatures that most people had never heard of. He did it with a real sense of awe. He didn't look back when it was over. Before fans could fully understand and accept his choice, Wade told them something else. A part of the story that hadn't been shown on the show. He had mostly kept quiet about what happened for years. But now, for the first time, he felt free to talk. Even his most devoted fans were shocked by what he said next, and fans were shocked again when Jeremy Wade told the truth. The finally broke his silence was Jeremy Wade. Fans have wondered for years what the real reason was for River Monsters' end. Was it tiredness, low numbers, or politics at the network? Most of the time, Jeremy Wade had been quiet. He didn't go on a farewell tour or send out dramatic press statements. After the show was over, he was no longer visible. Wade began to open up over time, though, and what he said added a whole new layer to the story. It wasn't shocking or dramatic. It was just the truth, and in its own way it was more powerful than any idea fans had come up with. After a few calm, deep conversations, Wade started to think about River Monsters with a sense of calm finality. He said that he had certainly accomplished all the things he had planned to do. Tracking down strange creatures was what the show was all about. Legends about freshwater creatures that scared locals, started stories, and scientists couldn't figure out. But those riddles were over by the 9th season. Wade said that some shows can go on for a long time. It couldn't do that for us. He wasn't saying it because he was upset. Neither was he angry or upset. He even seemed proud. Wade believed in the show's basic goal, which was to search, reveal, and clear things up. He thought it would be unfair to keep going. As soon as that job was over, to keep the cameras running, it would have been simple to change the format, make up new threats, or start hunting less interesting species. Wade didn't want to lie, though. Honestly, he cared about the people there too much to lie to them. He left because he felt responsible to the people who watched the show, the animals, and the idea behind the show. Wade said that going on would have made him feel like disrespecting what River Monsters stood for. It was never about flashy fun or fake drama on the show. It was about mysteries and finding out things. It was the right thing to do to let go of that world, when there was nothing more to find there. Wade wasn't even close to being done exploring, though. He understood that his interest had not gone away after reading River Monsters. Not gone away. Instead of going after individual fish, he started to care more about the health of the ecosystems those fish relied on. That's how his next show, Mighty Rivers, came to be. Wade now looked into the world's largest rivers to find out what was killing them, what could save them, and how people were changing some of the planet's most important lifelines. Then mysteries of the deep came to life, bigger into the underwater phenomenon that no one can understand. It gave Wade access to even more stories and essays, from cities that sank to the strangest creatures. All of them still had Wade's signature approach of cautious skepticism, deep study, and a complete commitment to the truth. River Monsters was a hit because of the energy, stories, and scientific interest he brought to it. but he did it with a different take. One important thing that these projects showed was that Jeremy Wade wasn't just good at one show. He told stories for a reason. He wasn't trying to get famous, he was trying to find answers. He could have turned river monsters into a commercial that would never end, but he decided to be honest. When I heard it years later, it reminded me of exactly why the show struck such a chord with so many people. The story was never over the top, and he didn't need razzmatazz exits to let the truth stand out. Fans started to understand more as he went into new areas that they hadn't seen before. River monsters may be over for Jeremy Wade, but the spirit of this tough adventure and the search for the unknown goes on in everything he does. But don't think Wade slowed down after River Monsters. Some fans thought that Jeremy Wade would step away from the spotlight after River Monsters finished. Who could blame him for taking a break after fighting dangerous animals and going to the ends of the world for almost 10 years? It didn't happen that way. Wade didn't slow down. He changed gears. He jumped right into new projects almost right away, using the hard-earned knowledge he has gained to help a bigger cause. River Monsters was about finding the truth behind myths. His new book would be about finding the truth behind a much more serious threat: the destruction of the places where those monsters lived. River Monsters was Wade's first job after Mighty Rivers. It was a big change. He wasn't looking for mythical beasts this time. He was trying to figure out what was hurting the rivers. Each episode was about a big river, like the Amazon, the Mississippi, or the Danube, that used to be full of life, but was now showing scary signs of going downhill. These great rivers were not what they used to be, because people had polluted them, fished them too much, and changed them. Wade, who had been observing things for years, became both the storyteller and the detective. Mighty Rivers showed a more thoughtful and hurried side of Wade. No longer was it just about the thrill of the chase. It was about figuring out what comes next after the chase. What happens when the monsters are gone? It's not because they've been caught, but because their homes can't stay alive anymore. This wasn't just a question for Wade. He had been there and seen the changes. It was eerie how empty the rivers were that they used to be full of life. Some of the places he saw in River Monsters had changed in scary ways since then. It wasn't just telling stories anymore. It was a warning. Then came the series Mysteries of the Deep, which gave him even more freedom. Wade looked into strange things that people have seen in the ocean, like sunken ships, lost towns, and strange things that people have heard about. The structure was less strict and the canvas was bigger, but he still did things the same way. A sense of wonder without exaggeration. He wasn't making things up. He looked into it. It stood out that Wade's writing was calm and realistic in a field that is often full of exaggeration. He was known as a straight shooter, which made even the craziest stories seem serious and not just a way to get attention. Wade's love for nature grew stronger as he talked about more than just river monsters. He shared his thoughts on the great rivers and the secrets of the deep. Wade's growing concern for wildlife was linked to his deliberate choice to use his public position to raise awareness of critically threatened species, habitats that are disappearing, and the delicate balance that keeps freshwater ecosystems going. It was easy to understand. These rivers are more than just places to shoot or use as backgrounds. They protect millions of people, animals, and cultures, but they are also in danger. Wade knew that for many people, he was the first time they had seen these animals and seen this area. That was important. So he didn't fade away. Instead, he took on that duty. He began to work with environmental groups more closely, teach at events, and write about how important it is to protect waterways. He turned into more than just a host. He became a lawyer. And this may have been the most important discovery. Wade's work after River Monsters wasn't a big change. From the first show was the next part that made sense. Because River Monsters wasn't just about scary fish at its core. It had to do with respect. Respect nature, mystery, and the thin line that separates growth for people and survival for the environment. There was always that message, though it was often hidden by the thrills. Indeed, This more important goal was always what River Monsters was all about. What River Monsters are really trying to do. River Monsters looked like a show about big fish at first glance. It had all the elements of a TV thrill ride, a mystery, danger, tension, and faraway places. But people who paid close attention started to see something more. There was a quiet, constant message that got louder as the seasons changed. It was there beneath the heart-pounding moments and scary stories. Jeremy Wade was after more than just monsters. He was taking away fear. He had a class. Most of all, he wanted people to see the wild world, especially the animals that people don't understand, in a new way. Wade has talked about how River Monsters was never just about the catch. Yes, catching a 200-pound catfish or a tigerfish with sharp teeth made for exciting TV. But the fight with the rod and line at the end of each show wasn't what made it interesting. It was the trip to learn what people were scared of. Wade talked to every icon with 2 questions from the start. What is this thing? Why does it scare people so much? The show became more than just a hunt because of those questions. They went on a psychological journey that helped them get to the bottom of rumors, myths, and misunderstandings. Wade found over and over that the animals people were most afraid of were often the ones who were being blamed the most wrongly. People thought that a fish ate people, but it turned out that it just ate trash. For decades, the name of a killer species had been wrong. And with each new information, the crowd changed in some way. What used to be fear became interest. It went from disgust to respect. People started to realize that these monsters weren't bad guys. They were just survivors who had been shaped by their surroundings. Entire habitats depend on them. The second reason for making River Monsters was then slowly exposed. In its own way, each show taught us how to protect the environment. Wade made the bigger problem of natural decline more personal by focusing on specific species. Even though most people had never heard of or cared about them, he gave them names, faces, and lives. As people got to know these animals and saw how strong, beautiful, and vulnerable they were, it became harder to ignore the fact that many of them were going extinct, not because of natural causes but because of what people did. Wade never taught. He didn't add long talks about pollution or fishing too much. He told stories instead, which got people to care. He was one of the best environmental speakers on TV, without ever trying to be one, and that's what made him that way in the end. He became a quiet hero for the earth, someone who didn't protest or run for office, but used curiosity and understanding to change how people thought about things one show at a time. He turned fishing, which most people think of as a fun or competitive activity, into a story, and the story into a cause. Fans didn't just watch to see the next monster. They watched to learn something, see something new, or figure out something weird and crazy. And that's not easy to do in a time when people are easily distracted and don't pay attention for long. River Monsters had done something that not many shows ever do by the time it was over. It was more than just fun. The way people thought about the world changed because of it. It helped them remember that there is a truth worth seeking beneath every myth, and that some of the most important finds start with fear. Wade stopped being afraid and taught a lot of people how to do the same. What will River Monsters leave behind? It was never only about getting fish. It was about shedding light on those who were confused, protecting the weak, and giving animals a voice that they didn't have one. With that much effect, there's no need for more movies. It never really left, so it doesn't need to come back. What do you think? Does the end of River Monsters by Jeremy Wade feel right? Or do you wish the story had gone on longer? Leave your thoughts in the box below. Please like, follow, and click on the next video on your screen if you liked this look into the hidden truth behind one of Animal Planet's most famous shows. We have more shocking news about the people behind your favorite shows, stars, and stories.